My name is Alec COF, and I'm here today to talk to you about livestock waste disposal. So today in the United States, the way we farm large amounts of livestock can no longer be regarded as farming, and the EPA now calls the techniques used to farm animal feeding operations and concentrated animal feeding operations. And so the techniques used for these farms include large amounts of animals in confined spaces, and essentially the way they dispose of the waste of these animals is harmful on both sides of the operation, the animal feeding operations and the concentrated animal feeding operations. So the technique used is an open-air lagoon. They essentially dump large amounts of waste from all the livestock they're farming into a lagoon that's exposed to the outside world. And so these waste disposal techniques are harmful to the environment, which in turn harms human beings. So essentially these techniques are damaging water supplies. The EPA reported that 40% of rivers and streams have been impaired, and the report also revealed that half of these rivers and streams have been polluted and compromised by agriculture, and 80% of the pollution caused by agriculture comes from livestock farming, comes from these open-air lagoons polluting groundwater and streams. So, waste disposal harms via the open-air lagoon harms the environment. For instance, in Maryland and North Carolina, there was a hurricane that caused runoff from chicken and hog waste factories to leak into local streams, rivers, and the surrounding areas, bodies of water, and it killed millions of fish and caused problems in human beings, including short-term memory loss, cognitive problems, and skin irritation. And although no direct study was done on the citizens of Maryland and North Carolina, a researcher by the name of Dr. Joanne Burkholder was studying the effects of the microorganism Pfiesteria pesticida. And while working in a laboratory, she began to experience severe confusion, and she experienced respiratory problems. So the laboratory was closed, and it had to have a new ventilation system installed. So once the new ventilation system was installed, the health effects of the researchers started to go away, and they weren't harmed as much. But there were many reports that were linked to the exposure of this microorganism in the area of skin lesions, headaches, cognitive deterioration in fishermen, water skiers, swimmers, and researchers who were studying fish kills in the area. And lagoons found on these operations not only pollute groundwater, but they deplete it. As we know, at Cal Poly we recycle our water, and they also recycle their water on these operations and clean it. However, it essentially is just wasting the water. So how does it directly harm humans? Well, these operations with the open-air lagoons release harmful gases into the environment. One of the gases is hydrogen sulfide, which when released into the air becomes dangerous to human beings and can cause shortness of breath, coughing, comatose, and even death. This gas is also dangerous in low exposure, and the Congressional Research Service has rated hydrogen sulfide released by manure on AFOs and CAFOs as a significant threat to the quality of human life. Also, the chemicals released by open-air lagoons are harmful to human communities as well as quality of life. Nitrates are also released into the ground via these open-air lagoons. And it is reported that in the United States, 1.3 million households rely on water that is contaminated above the maximum contaminant level set by the EPA. And there was also a study done in LaGrange County, Illinois, that stated that high levels of nitrate in drinking waters were linked to spontaneous abortions in women. And 3 women who lived within 3 miles of a hog farm were all exposed to levels of nitrates through this waste disposal technique that was leaked into the groundwater. So their water was compromised, and they were consuming contaminated water, which it was discovered led to spontaneous abortion, which essentially is their children died, like stillbirth. So the techniques used to dispose of these of the waste clearly is harmful and can cause pollution in groundwater, and is a threat to human communities and to the well-being of humans who are exposed to any chemicals of pollution through these techniques of disposing waste.
All right, Alec, I think I figured out what the proposition was, but you've got it a little bit buried in the opening, and I think you need to be more specific about identifying it. There's not really a preview of what the supporting structure is going to be. I do think that you found a subject that offers some problem for us, and the issue of the level of risk and danger. I think that's where the controversy is, and so I think you do have something that's argumentative here, and so you're on the right track, but the start of the speech needs to set this up a little bit more clearly. The body of the speech continues that problem. I think you've got a lot of information, but it hasn't been sorted through very clearly. I heard the water issues in at least 2 or 3 different places, so it seems like it's just randomly being dropped in instead of having been coordinated and planned, and you want the argument to build a little bit more clearly. There aren't any internal declarative sentences. I just am getting a lot of data that's being presented, and the data is good. I think that you did a pretty good job researching the material. I do think the sources are a little bit inconsistent because some of the material is not given a source citation. There are also a couple of places where you seem to be making some big inferences. The fact that the one researcher got sick is then being used to make an inference about the danger of this microorganism. I also didn't see any data, since we're talking about the evidence here, that indicates that the microorganism only exists as a result of the lagoons and the contamination that they create. The same sort of thing with the argument at the end about water. You say we got 1.3 million people who are relying on contaminated water, but is that water that's been contaminated by these lagoons? I think that's an inference that you're making that's a little bit problematic. I think you were better off in the first part where you talked about we have our waterways, there's a high amount of contamination, and most of that contamination is a result of these open air lagoons. That, I think, was a clearer argument, and if your argument had been as consistent as that in the rest of the speech, I think it would have been easier to follow. You got sidetracked on recycling at one point. The microorganism is important, I assume, because it's an illustration of one of the dangers that occurs from this kind of contamination, but it sounds like it only occurred when we had a hurricane, and is that really the only risk that is going on there? Well, I don't know what the hurricane did, if it made the lagoon spill over, or it caused the water to run through there, and then you got cross contamination. That's the most dangerous element of that kind of experience. I think you could probably find some other ways to demonstrate it. The example that you have at the end of spontaneous abortions, that needs a source citation, and the idea that these women were living within 3 miles of one of these lagoons. What's the population within any of those ranges? I think that would be something that would add to your argument as well. The exit sounded a bit uncertain. You sound less like you feel as confident about the argument that you're making, and more like you're just looking for the exit at the end of the speech, and you don't want to be in that situation. All right, thank you.